I'm gonna cover as well many of the things that we have been already mentioning here about urban digital twins. The approach that we have particularly in COSI in our group and in my research at TTH is about how they can enact and they can articulate more inclusive cities and better, sustainable, and participatory cities. And let's start for the basic, which probably is the more complicated thing. And it's one thing that Mike was already pointing out, which is like digital twin is quite a problematic term because we are now branding digital twin as many different things. On one hand, the term is started like in the 2000s, like mostly applied for manufacturing and for the special probes actually by NASA. So they were like very bounding deterministic processes. So it was very easy to define which was the objectives, how are the processes, the mechanism. But now basically we are applying them to much more complicated things. Originally, okay, we can agree on this basic definition, which is like a representation of a digital representation of a real asset, which is basically creating kind of like a feedback loop with sensing and actuating in reality. But the problem is like when we have been starting to grow the concept of digital twin, so now we are expecting which are the real data, real-time data collection enabled by IoT and other kind of technologies. As well, we are expecting that the virtual system is kind of like actuating through virtual systems or like actuators in the real environment. And we are not talking only about the digital twin. Actually, we can talk about subsystems of systems which are related, which are interconnected, which are creating kind of like a hierarchical network. What it's not a tree either. It's like a very complex network of interaction. So at the end, we are talking about many digital twins within many digital twins. And the most interesting thing about this is that it's not really new. When we think about digital twins, and many of the concepts that we have for digital twins, just consider that some people, and according to these definitions, Google Maps is a digital twin. They represent that this is a digital representation of the reality. We interact with that. We have real data, we have forecasting, we have prediction, and actually it affects the way that we are using the city. So actually it falls in kind of like definition of range of digital twins. But the Pacific Islanders already have like a representation of oceanic currents for navigating between islands on the Pacific. And this is pretty much as well like a digital representation or a representation of a given system that was actually usable for them. But now as well, we are talking about like human digital twins for health supposedly, or for medication, or for other kind of like research, for doing research supposedly safely. So we have this range of different representations, different levels of accomplishment of digital twins, from the very simplistic ones to the more advanced, sophisticated ones, still getting to that ideal of digital twin, which should be theoretically kind of like autonomous, able to collect data in real time, autonomously, to react and to compute like as well independently without the human intervention, and to be able to feed back into the physical system for improving efficiency, for improving like for optimizing part of the some aspect of the reality. And the things like in the moment that we start to ramp up in this kind of like all of this actually or come fall within the definition of digital twin, then we start to see like to heal this wall of enough data is not, I mean, more data is not sufficient. Actually, not for having more data, we have better models. As well, we have like many issues for actually understanding or explaining mechanism just based on purely machine learning or AI aspects. As well, we were saying about optimizing. I was discussing before with Monica about some of the aspects of transportation, that there are like many aspects of mobility and transportation that don't respond to actual optimization problems. So there are like many other things which actually have to do as well with human and with non-quantitative aspects of human life, which as well are related to the aspects that Peter was mentioning about quantification of socio-economic human systems. So we are hitting all these kind of like problems when we are increasing the complexity of our systems, and it's just growing even more when we are just checking the last realizations or the last visions about digital twins and how actually they can intervene on the physical environment. We have basically actuators, we have virtual reality, mixed reality environments. And actually there is a very interesting thing here. and this is gonna be the most apocalyptic negative part of this talk. Then I'm gonna go much more in a positive way. But actually it's interesting because it's human behavior, the thing which is very complicated actually to capture, to measure, and to understand in a machine, for a machine. But one of the interesting things, for example, when we are talking about metaverse, and this will be just one example. The interesting thing of this is that actually, and we were mentioning that in our chapter, is that in that moment you would be quantifying every single aspect, every single glaze of human behavior, which implies or it enables commodification, monetization, and all the other kind of like mercantilization of human behavior, which is actually a very interesting plot twist somehow. But this is just like a potential like dual use. Dual use is like common in many in any technology, so it's not a problem. Just very briefly, smart city as well, like a very problematic term. You have been hearing about this for years. It's as well like technology driven, looking for optimization, driven by corporations, not really taking into account like human aspects of the city or human-centric, and these are the things which actually we are missing. And actually they are pretty much matching or overlapping with many of the problems that we are finding right now as well in digital twins. And just if you analyze it a bit carefully, it's as well like has a lot to do with one thing that, for example, Luis was saying, but as well like Michael, Peter, as well you were mentioning about like who has the right, I mean, who has access, who is creating the data, who has access to that, which is the agency of people for computing, for accessing, but as well like the capacity, like, I mean, can you really understand how you then expertise or knowledge for understanding and managing that data? And they are so closely together because basically for cities, digital twins, the ultimate, the cutting edge realization of the smart cities. So that's why they are really colliding within the same realm. Somehow as well corporations, and I think that's part of this like ramping up and hype on the term, rebranding many things of the smart cities through digital twins solutions. And that's why, and they are falling in the same kind of like rhetoric, which is like more data, more accuracy, better predictions. But at the end, we are still facing, we have problems with coupling, reality, the real, the physical realm and the virtual realm, and as well we have problems of predictability, of forecasting of those systems. And the things like, as we know, the city is not like a Turing machine. It's much more complex. It's a weak problem by definition, which is always changing. And every single time that you chase a solution, the problem actually has been redefined completely. So that's why it's not working in this particular way. So is this enough? We argue that no. Because for sure we have all these like political, social aspects that they are very complicated to grasp. Who is defining which is the common good in a city? And those are questions that are usually not taken into account into digital twin, the smart city discourses, because they are kind of completely alien to the usual rhetoric. So how we are envisioning this, for example, is through how these tools can enable participation and can enable people to understand better the complexity, because for sure we have a cognitive problem when it comes to the effects and the impact of our decision making in policy making. It's very complicated to understand all those complexity, cascading effects, spillover effects. So I mean, it's just very simple. For example, and I mentioned to some of you this project about creating like a digital twin of the city of Barcelona, and it was very simple. It's like, do citizens actually know that by closing roads, actually the traffic and the pollution can improve? It's like very counterintuitive, but if you don't have really the tools for being able to make those questions, it's completely like sterile. It's completely useless to try to enact this kind of like discussion. And actually, we somehow like suggest that many of those participatory projects and processes could be richer, because Barcelona is kind of like the golden standard in many aspects for participation of citizens, right? But when you analyze, and all the information is public, which is very nice, but you see that the process is very top-down. I think that we agree here that top-down is bad somehow, right? So it's very top-down address. because actually you don't provide to citizens these kind of tools really for explore and co-create, and just to be reflect and realize of the effects of their own decisions. They may change their opinion, maybe not. Maybe some of them would be like reconsidering some of their preferences. But we really believe that by conceptualizing those processes with these tools, we can really modify and improve those participatory processes. So just to wrap up, because I think that I'm over time. So as we envision these as digital sensors, like providing alternatives for policy making, for urban planning, for city making. We envision the city for sure like an open-ended process, or urban planning or policy making. The technology or these technologies are mostly enablers for participation and for converging. One of the biggest challenges, and if some of you have been like involved in policy making on participatory projects, have been always converging different opinions of people, different agendas, and trying to reconcile these kind of different ideas that people have or visions of the city. So actually, those tools as well that I think that somebody as well was mentioning some of these, like how you can merge different kind of opinions. And basically, this is very important. And this is like a kind of like, I repeat this many times, the digital twins are much more interesting and important for their exploratory power than for their predictive power. And this is like, I think that usually is not highlighted, but we see that it can be like very useful and actionable for policy making. And finally, this is another paper that basically I think that almost everybody in the lab at that time collaborated in this paper, how we can think of digital twins actually for sandboxes. If most of you are on software development, so you know, like you don't deploy a service directly to the public and you just messed up. Well, some people do, but it's like a bad practice. You do that on sandboxes and you just test things before deploying them for real. And actually, we could do that as well with policy. Having a model which is it's realistic enough for providing insights about which could be the effects of policies, and just testing them on a safe environment. And this is why what we understand by virtual sandboxes for policy testing. So yeah, those are like the kind of general ideas. I think that I'm kind of like overlapping with many of the things that you have been mentioning over the next days. Yeah, and thank you so much for your time and being here.